do it Joe Rogan style and just you're talking when you go live and people act like the conversation's been happening behind the scenes the entire
Exactly.
time. So, I kind of like that. Although the reason you do the countdown video is because then, well, so there's two ways of doing it. If you do the kind of like intro banter, then people aren't missing anything important. But then the countdown helps to achieve the same thing where people are all tuned in before you actually start talking. But I like the countdown stuff. I like to hype it up and whatnot, but I guess I'm just a little bit of a showman in that way.
Yeah, I'm too
So
lazy
to
to do all
speak.
that production value stuff, man. I just hit record and start talking and hope somebody
Well,
shows up.
I'm the only one at LCI who does all that, and that's just partly because like I love making them and doing them, and I just think it's cool. But then like when someone else hosts the green room, they're just literally like, "Okay, and we're live," and they just like jump right in, and that works too. There's more than one way to do a podcast or do a live show. But I'm also honor bound. I have to. It's probably better that we did this natural intro because I'm honor bound based on the part of the problem Discord because they don't believe that I'm the real me in the Discord, so I have to like say that I'm extremely bricked up for this conversation tonight. So that was part of the proving that I'm the real Jacob Winograd. Not that I don't know why anyone would want to impersonate me. I don't think I'm gonna,
That means you
especially.
made it, Jacob. That means you made it right there. I'm still waiting for that level.
I, 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 I've made it to I'm a somewhat popular podcaster in certain libertarian circles. That is a high echelon award to
It is. I'm
be
still
able to
like
wear.
at least 3 years away from that. So good on you, man.
Awesome. Well, we already got people live in the chat. We got, of course, Terry saying hi, Jacob and Brent. Hello, Terry.
Hey, Terry.
How are you doing? We got Free who reposted the stream. I appreciate it, Free. Brent, you were I think you were you did as well as you could, I think, along with Hody in trying to help me beat Amity on my first appearance on Are You Smarter Than a Politician? I unfortunately was not able to. I came up that short, but we she's not going to be on. I don't think she's going to be on when I'm coming back on the show the 19th, so next Friday. I don't think she'll be on. So, but I'm definitely looking forward to when I get that rematch. It'll have to happen at some point. But I am here tonight. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I see we got a pretty good number who have tuned in now. This is, of course, I did a stream before this, which was actually just me restreaming my appearance on DL Cummings' show, which is the Liberty Dad podcast. He just started a new show, which is just kind of a dad talk thing, which was a lot of fun because they get to talk about more just kind of parenting stuff and marriage stuff and relationship stuff, which as someone who's been married for going on, it's been over, so it's like 11 and a half years now, and been with the same woman for even longer than that. I have a lot of experience, not all of it like successful experience. It's been something I've had to learn and grow at and realize how much I didn't know, but that was a lot of fun and people should check that out when they're done here. But this is my regularly scheduled Monday night green room. I'm, of course, Jacob Winograd, host of the Biblical Anarchy podcast here at the Libertarian Christian Institute. And I'm joined by my good friend, Brent Freeman. He is the host of the Aiming Up podcast. I've made several appearances on his show. But, Brent, this is your first time over here on one of my shows here at LCI. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, just kind of your background and what you talk about on your show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Jacob. Really an honor. Yeah, Brent Freeman, as Jacob said, and I run Aiming Up Podcasts. It's been going for about a year and a half right now, up to like 112 episodes or something like that. Had a bunch of liberty-minded people, but also deal with a lot of neuroscience, deal with a lot of health and nutrition and fitness, and pretty much anything I'm into. Some psychedelics, some weird stuff, religion, spirituality. Runs the whole gamut. So it's an interesting show. Had some great guests beside yourself. I've had people like Zuby on there. I've had Tyler Toad, had Dr. Lawrence Krauss on there. really decent guests for a small podcast. I'm really proud of what we do over there. We get like no views, but that's cool. Well, we're kind of anticipating like 3, 4, 5 year curve before things go upwards. So going to keep grinding at it and keep trying to put out good content and talk to great guests. And also recently launched a Narco Syndicate clothing company. So shout out. So the new threads that just launched, did a collaboration with the Black Guns Matter. So that was a really fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, that was really fun to launch. All the proceeds of that, all that BGM and Solutionary merch, go directly to my guy over there running the Solutionary Center. So I'm really excited about that collab. I'm so stoked about that. Yeah, he's such a cool dude, man.
I love Maj. I've met him a couple times. I've never had him on my show, and I keep meaning to. It's just the like Second Amendment stuff hasn't been, I guess, like the sexy stuff in the news and in the zeitgeist to talk about. So I haven't done it yet. But I definitely want to have him on at some point. But I know some of you in the comments have already noticed, but I started doing this new thing a few weeks ago back where now, because YouTube has the vertical live stream thing as well, and it's just a good way to like, there's a lot of people who will just find live streams just by scrolling through shorts. And so like, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? But I also know if it's like 2 people on the screen for a short view, like vertical view, that looks weird. So if you're watching it on that, you don't have to. You just click on the channel, swap over to the regular landscape view, be a lot easier on your eyes. I'm really excited for tonight's conversation. I, of course, titled this with you gotta always pick a title. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but sort of the focus or theme was, is anarchy possible? I feel like you're a good person to talk about that with. I've kind of been in various formats, including the kind of high profile, at least high profile in certain libertarian circles, debates that I've been kind of part of over the last few weeks. It's been part of that as well.
That's what I listened to on the plane back from Italy. I listened to that entire thing and ask anybody in the plane. I was almost screaming. I wanted to yell through the screen during that debate. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
I hope they served free drinks on the plane to listen to that 3.5 hour podcast. I felt like I was ill prepared. I only came down with 1 beer, and about an hour and a half into it, I was like,
What frustrated me is like you had the answer to the whole thing that they were arguing about, and you didn't bring it up until the very end. It was a silly thing. And by the way, I love both of those guys. Like I get they're out there trying to do their thing, and I think my analysis is that Dave is an excellent communicator about liberty matters, right? But he's not a great philosopher. I don't think Dave would say like I'm this excellent philosopher. And Liquid Zulu is kind of like better at philosophy, but still not great. I sense, and this is no shade at all, by the way. I'm just somebody who's been in the philosophy game for a very long time, and so he's obviously imbibed all of the standard fares from the libertarian philosophers. He's read the Hayek and Mises, and he can recite it, and he knows kind of what their positions are. But I don't think he's thought through the purpose of philosophy, particularly with the NAP, right? Like it's so silly because like you can define like what the NAP is, you can define what an act of aggression is, you could define what constitutes a transgression. But when Dave is just like doing that sort of common sense thing, like, oh, so wait a minute, if someone's got a gun to your head, is going to kill your family member, you're going to strictly adhere to that. And he's like, yes, damn straight. And it's like, no, that's not what it's fucking for, man. Like the point of the NAP is to identify. It's a diagnostic. That's all it is. It's a gauge. Yeah. It's like to identify whether a transgression has occurred. It says nothing to do with what do you do about it. Right.
No, exactly. And the standard libertarian answer for as long as I can remember is that there are instances where you might aggress against someone, and it's still aggression. And then after that, if you're an ethical person and if the society is ethical, you will have to either you're probably going to go before a court, a judge, no matter what. And then you can either like plead your case and maybe they'll show mercy or give you a lighter sentence, but like it doesn't change the crime. But anyway, that's that.
Well, and also most human beings, like literally 99.9 infinite nines, if like, hey, yeah, somebody had a gun pointed at your child's head and they're gonna, like torture them forever unless you stole a penny from me, like take the fucking penny. Like that's what most people are gonna do.
I can appreciate Zulu tries to come up with novel approaches to these reductio cases where he's like, well, maybe there's ways where, like, if you actually think about the hypotheticals in terms of like how that would play out in real life, that and like, listen, I appreciate that, and like you said, I like both of those guys, and it was a really hard debate for me to moderate because it was like I'm not moderate because
Yep.
like I have so much agreement with both of them and so much disagreement with both of them. So there were so many times where like I would like almost be entering the debate against both of them because I'd be like, well, hold on, Zulu. Like, don't you think that like you need to rethink the way you're approaching this and not just view it through the lens of law? And then be with Dave, be like, well, hold on, don't you think that like this argument might work for public property, but like it's a huge leap to jump from what a school should do to what a nation should do over the entire border and immigration. So like, you know, like I'm of course a podcaster and I usually do debates. I don't usually moderate debates. So I'm sitting there like trying to like, you know, I'm like white knuckling it the entire time, just like trying not. I'm like that meme of the kid next to the girl in the school and he's just sitting there
Yep.
just like,
Veins popping out.
yeah, that's me the entire time. Uh, but
Yeah.
like, so like all of this meta stuff is almost even like, what is libertarianism? What is anarchism? And then like also like, can we have anarchy? And one of the super chats here, which kind of goes with the title of this the stream tonight, came from AT Leon 715 for $10. Thank you very much. He said, is anarchy actually possible? Even in nature, cells cluster into organs and bodies. Do human societies inevitably form states the same way, whether we intend to or not? Now, I'm gonna piggyback on this to ask you a question here, because I do want to talk about anarchism, but I also want to just talk about libertarianism for a second, because this is sort of the minarchist critique here. Because I think minarchists agree with the NAP, but just think that there's no way to have a stateless society. And I feel like I disagree with that. And I actually think we can answer this question and sort of explain why I don't think it's inevitable that we'll end up with a state. But do you think it's useful? Because I think part of the like the Zulu crowd is like they're saying that like only anarchists are real libertarians. And don't get me wrong, I think anarchists are the most consistent libertarians. But I just feel like I want to be kind of goodwill and understanding towards minarchists who like maybe just have that like skepticism to be like, I don't know if your stateless society can actually work and organize. And I don't know that it's the most unreasonable position to have, to be like, the state's inevitable. So we just need to make sure it's small and just enforces the NAP. Like, I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah, well, it kind of did, but it's such a contradiction in terms, right? Like, and another thing, I'm not a big label person, right? Like, I've actually, a narco syndicate clothing, it's meant to be all encompassing. It's like everybody in the pool. Like, if you're liberty minded, right? If you are constitutional conservative, you're a minarchist, you're a small L, big L. I don't really care. Like, if you have liberty on your mind and you want to use a libertarian label, I don't care. I don't think it does anybody any good to sort of gatekeep and say, well, you can't call yourself. I'm like, whatever. Like, I don't. There's left libertarians. There's right Like, I really don't care. But when it comes down to it, I'm sort of like in that camp of like, are you pro state or anti state? Right, because it comes down to like, what's your view on aggression, right? Like, do you really want a group of people to have a monopoly that has rights that you and I don't have, right? And that's the crux of the matter for me, right? And because logically, you kind of can't. Like, you kind of have to say like, I'm a utilitarian. You have to sort of either be in like, I'm in the ethical philosophy camp. So I don't want aggression. I don't want this group to have these extra powers. Or you say, well, I know it's evil and I know it's wrong, but I can't, in my mind, can't work out the way that we could potentially, organize society without this. So I'm in favor of it. And I wish people were just more honest about being in those two camps. I see a lot of people that call themselves minarchists that try to say, like you said, oh, well, the government, yeah, we're going to keep them small and they're just going to enforce the NAP. And it's like, well, you can't. And this is where I come back to, like, I don't think you can be pro-life and pro-government. I don't think you can be technically libertarian and pro-government. You can't enforce the NAP because anything a government does, I don't care what it is, whether that's borders, whether that's going to be courts, whether that's going to be policing or whatever, that there's a gun pointed at somebody first that extracts their money without their consent to sort of operate the whole thing. And so there's always a threat of murder behind anything. So you can't, it's just mutually exclusive. These are contradictions in terms.
Yeah, I do think it can be. I think I mostly agree with you. I think that it can be a little muddy depending on what minarchist you talk about, because some of them now I still criticize this. I want to preface this with that I still disagree with it and I can criticize it. But some minarchists say, well, what we're going to have is a government that doesn't tax and that's completely voluntary, and people can like, and it gets to the point where I'm like,
That's
yeah, I
not a
think you're
government, Jacob.
actually, I think you're just describing anarchy with the wrong words at that point, is sort of where I end up with them. Or I'm like, or at the very least, if it's a state or a government, then like describing a government that doesn't tax and is voluntary is basically like a square circle or a unicorn. Like it's just something that's not real, or it's a contradiction. So, but it's like, I want to simultaneously model that, like, I think in-house conversation within the liberty movement about ideas and about philosophy is good. I
Mm-hmm.
just think we should do that without like, it should be in the mutual pursuit of like getting closer to truth and more consistently advocating for liberty, and not the game of like, you're not a real libertarian. That's the thing that I don't like.
So annoying. My God. No, I
Yeah.
completely agree. And I think that there's also this sort of economy that's emerged. And I saw this, and I think Dave even acknowledged this with Zulu, is that like, he talked a bunch of shit about him and baited him into a debate. And the debate never would have happened without all that rhetoric. And it's like, there's a bunch of clicks, there's a bunch of monetization tied to it. And I hate seeing that, right? Because it just drives this sort of narrative that libertarians can't be civil. Like, I'm not saying that they were both not civil, but you get what I'm saying. There's these factions and we're fighting with each other. I'm going to take you down. I'm going to, it's like WWE stuff. We're talking all this stuff to get the fight hyped up, and it's like, hey, can we just have a reasonable, rational conversation and say to each other, like, hey, Jacob, I see it differently. How do you see it? And be curious about our perspectives, and not,
Yeah, yeah. No,
like that.
and that was part of my problem with, like, there are some topics where I think a formal debate is actually good and useful, but the topic that they were debating, like, and this kind of backfired, and I've seen some people criticize the way I moderated it, and I can kind of understand it, and I probably should have done a better job of sort of like setting the stage for how the debate was going to go. Because like what they agreed to and what they wanted was to kind of have opening statements and then have an open dialogue, because they didn't, because everyone's, I think, seen debates where what happens is, because everything is strictly tied to speaking times and order and whatnot, that like people just kind of speak past each other and there's not actual interaction between their ideas. Whereas with open debate, there is more of that like spontaneous order, libertarian idea, to kind of like not be so focused on the structure and let the people actually like hold both of each other to kind of like, hold on, don't go that way. Like, you're not answering my question. Like, and so I wanted to allow that as much as I could, but I still think it probably would have been even better if it wasn't a debate and it was just a discussion, because it could have been like a, like a hybrid of a sort, debate discussion, but not maybe even tying it to a specific resolution, because I think that kind of topic would have just done better if it wasn't like the showmanship of like trying to win, and it would have just
Mhm.
been more of a like where do we disagree, and can we steel man each other, can we understand where each other's coming from. I think some of that came out, but it kind of, I think what ended up happening was that it was like not quite a debate but not quite a discussion, and so I think it left a lot of people kind of like dissatisfied. But even me, I was kind of like a little bit dissatisfied. Not totally. Like, I think some good things came out of it, but yeah, I don't necessarily want to focus on the debate the entire time. But I do think that it's sort of this thing where the reason that debate happened and the reason why there was so much onus on it isn't even necessarily because it featured Dave and Zulu, but like, this is stuff, these are tensions that have been boiling under the surface in the liberty movement and even in the party for a very long time, and they haven't been resolved yet. And some of that is because I think there aren't enough conversations. And it is kind of funny how we as a movement, I don't know if you have an answer to this, and we still haven't gotten to really at Lion's question yet, which I do want to get to, but it's like there's something about the liberty movement which doesn't falsify libertarianism or anarchism, but it's at least kind of a stumbling block, which is like, how is it that a people so devoted to the idea of liberty and social cooperation and free markets are just so vitriolic and divided and like I think it's one listen, I'm a Christian, so like obviously this exists in my world too. And there is sometimes some viciousness, and certainly in history there were religious wars and whatnot. But at least right now in Christendom, you see debates between Catholics and Protestants and Presbyterians and Lutherans and whatnot, and they're not like I think they're at least kind of more civil. They're more ecumenical. They're more like this is an in-house debate, right? Uh, the liberty movement, like I think some of us are trying to push it in that direction, but for many, I know many people who consider themselves at least functionally libertarian, but they just want nothing to do with the party or the movement because it's just kind of embarrassing and kind of cringe to be part of it because it
Yeah.
does turn into this sort of like circle jerk of nonstop purity spiraling and infighting on one extreme, or the other extreme is sort of the like pragmatist, sort of like we're just going to kind of become more like the establishment. And those are like both extremes, which I have spent since I joined the liberty movement probably equal measures of time and energy pushing against.
Yeah, you want my analysis on why that is?
Yes.
I think it's because everybody's looking the wrong way. I think libertarians, anyone who's in, like I said, that sort of liberty sphere, they're all sitting around saying, how do we fix this on a macro scale? How do I fix the government? What are we going to do? Are we going to revolt? Are we going to, try to play the game and take over? And, like that meme of libertarians want to take over and leave everyone alone. Are we going that route? Political action? What are we going to do? And I think that's wrong, man. I think it's completely inverted. I think everything at this stage, we're late stage, man. We know that this whole thing is about ready to fall down. The whole house of cards is collapsing, is going to burn to rubble, and everyone's still thinking they can fix the government. It's like I always joke with some people, and I was like, "Hey, you can't fix her." It's like a stripper that's going to like do cocaine and key your car in the parking lot, and you're sitting there thinking that you're gonna be the guy that comes in and saves her. That's what government is, we're not fixing this. This has got no solve. And so everyone's so focused on this macro, we're going to fix the whole country, that they're forgetting about themselves. I know so many people that spend their entire life devoted to either being in the LP or some form of political action, or now I'm pivoting back to the Republican Party, or I'm going to do something else here. And they're just sort of like, they're just spiraling, trying to figure out how do we fix it. And they're not spending any of the time doing the agorist thing, which is like freeing yourself, like getting yourself stable, getting yourself some off-grid property and some self-sustaining, so you can take care of yourself, and you can still have the conversations, right? So try to convince people that liberty is a great idea. But there's not a lot of the Ron Paul thing where it's like setting a good example. That's why I love Maj Touré. He's out there like every day, like doing work, and I'm not seeing a bunch of that. That's one of the reasons I love that dude, because he's just out there doing the damn work every single day. And it's easier to talk and sort of mentally masturbate and purity spiral, and I'm the most pure libertarian, I'm gonna argue with you. Like, it's just easy to do that. It makes you feel good. Yeah, it kind of strokes the ego a little bit, but it's not moving the needle anywhere. And I think that's the problem I'm seeing in the party right now with the people that are in the liberty movement, is they're so focused on this external, I'm gonna fix this macro, not doing anything to establish things like some exchange with people, getting some people you can trade with. I got a guy in Arkansas that I get beef from, getting some resources put together, trading with people that are similarly minded. Like, it's not happening at a large scale. And I think it's a big mistake.
I agree with that. I want to get back to that further in the conversation, but I do want to touch on at Lion's question here. Is anarchy actually possible? And I guess like to steelman this question, he's saying that like, you know, uh, in nature, there are these natural tendencies towards organized structures. And so won't people, because of this tendency towards hierarchy and uh, kind of like forming a structure to sort of do that organization and I guess like codify that hierarchy, and because you could like say, listen, we look around the world today and throughout history, and it feels like these things called, and maybe they had different names at points, kingdoms and states and empires, but these have always existed. So, like, is it realistic to say that human society can organize in a way that's not like that? So, how do you go about answering that? Like, it's a very, not to like dismiss that line. I think it's a fair question. It's a common question that I think we anarchists get, and I have my own answer, but I want to hear what you say to that.
Yeah, what I say is it's an underappreciated question. I think there's a lot of people hand wave this away, and this is actually because I'm a somebody who believes in evolution, and I believe that these things did evolve for a reason. These things that government provides, these services, are needed, right? And I think what we've seen is like this state structure evolve to solve difficult problems in society. Um, that were sort of easier when you have economies of scale of a large population, right? Because I think, as you know, like liberty's messy. Like trying to figure out all the details is way harder than just sort of by fiat saying, "I will shoot you if everyone doesn't behave this way." And so I think it has advanced our, society in some ways to sort of do it that way. But I think in today's modern climate, it makes a lot more sense that we could do things much better by virtue of technology. As you know, I work for a big tech company, and so I see the way tech could advance liberty. And there's a lot of things that we do in this archaic way that we did evolve, these sort of structures, and they do solve, problems. I think policing is a great thing, for example. I just wish it was, open to competition. I wish it was something that we could have companies come in and think about all the technology they could bring to bear. We could voluntarily say to your policing provider, like, yeah, 100%, surveil my kids. Here, I'll give you the tech that lets you spy on my children. Make sure that they are safe. And if there's some creep that is sort of grooming them online or trying to like get into their DMs, like I want to know, like let me know as their parent, right? Like surveil the hell out of me. If somebody's trying to hurt them, show up and take care of them. If somebody's trying to break in my property, like there's so much stuff that we would allow a private company to do that we would never want the government to do, right? So I think there's opportunities, whether it's policing, and there's obviously blockchain out there now for smart contracts. There's a whole bunch of things that are going on in the tech space that we could solve historic problems that maybe a state structure evolved to sort of handle these things. We don't really need it anymore. I'm very much
Yeah,
in that Michael Malice mode of that anarchy is a relationship, not a location. We don't
I
have to
love
have.
that.
I do too. It's so perfect. We can choose. We choose our cell phone provider. We choose like all these different free market providers for most of our life. And to say like, oh, and the big ones, like we really can't do dispute resolution like through courts and and private companies. It's like that's bullshit. Because number one, don't know if you know this, most civil cases they get resolved by a private company. Here's a third party arbiter that like 92% or something like that of all the civil cases end up being adjudicated through a private company anyway. Don't tell me
Yeah.
you can't do it. Like this absolutely can be done.
Yeah, and a lot of the criminal cases, the ones into the state, like, they take years. I mean, like, sometimes someone's, like, convicted of a crime or sorry, charged with a crime, and it might be, like, 3 years or 5 years before, like, or, like, they'll go to court and then, uh yeah, there's just I'm not an expert on this, but, like, there'll be things where, like, there's mistrials or there's, like people will say, like, "Oh, there's more evidence has to be gathered," and just all sorts of things that can happen because of just how inefficient and how much, uh, bloat and bureaucracy there is. I love, by the way, that Michael Malice quote, "It's a relationship." I also love the one he said, which I didn't always love this. I used to think it was really dumb. I thought like I didn't get it the first time I heard it, where he said anarchy means that you don't speak for me, right?
Mm,
And that is such a powerful statement, right? Because like that is sort of what it's actually like restating the entirety almost of Anatomy of the State by Rothbard in like one line,
yep.
which is just to debunk the entire myth that we are the government, that because we voted or because of your sort of like divine bloodline or something like that, that you have a right to speak or act on my behalf without my consent, to act like, like, well, what you really want to do with your money is give it to me so I can go bomb brown kids halfway across the world, right? Like, no, you don't speak for me. You don't get to decide what, like, I mean, if you want to go do it, I guess you can, although, like, I think you shouldn't, and I think people should stop you if you're going to go and kill someone. But you can't, speak for me and be like, like, to compel me to say I want that, or I want to fund that, or to support it, or to say I can't oppose it, or to say, like, because the government did it, that, like, I'm part of it. Like, it's just it's kind of the guiding myth. It's the fundamental load bearing myth behind the idea of the nation state, of government. And I think I understand at Lyon's argument to some extent, that, like, yeah, like, natural hierarchies and whatnot, but at the same time, I think there's, like, a self defeater in there, which
Well,
is
hold
that,
on a
like,
second. Hold on a second. Hierarchies are not bad,
well,
right? I
right,
think I,
exactly.
I think this
Well,
idea, this notion that anarchy means no hierarchies is insane. Like
I agree.
anything that's anarchic in nature is going to have a hierarchy. For example, let's take music, right? Like you look at or even books, right? Like everything is kind of a Pareto distribution. There is a hierarchy. There is the best stuff out there that everyone agrees, like this is the best music that we all just love this regardless of genre. And if you look at it, it's like the top just 10 or 5% of artists make all the money from their music, and everybody else makes nothing, right? Everything is a hierarchy. There's anything that has quality involved in it, has human preference, is going to have a hierarchy. Like we prefer certain things, and the things that we prefer tend to organize in hierarchies, and that's just the way life is. And anybody, this is where the communists go sideways, is thinking that you can have a society with a hierarchy. You can sort of flatten society, and you just can't. The only way you can do that is by force. And if you do it by force, you're going to get basically everything sucking equally, everybody
right,
being equally
it's the
poor.
inverse. Like, I think the issue is that I believe in hierarchies, and hierarchies actually form naturally without force.
Hmm.
And so I think there's kind of but, like, I'm trying to, like, attack the argument, and not like, I know, I don't even know how to pronounce his handle, at Leon, at Lion. I don't know if you can correct me in the comments, but I've read it a million times, never said it out loud. But I feel like I understand that, like, like, there's a, in your head, when you hear the word anarchy, and there's a sort of, like, colloquial, sort of, like, assumed implicit meaning behind it, that anarchy means chaos, and to be fair, the original anarchists were kind of against hierarchy in a way, at least they thought they were. But I think as anarchism as a philosophy has evolved, it's realized, no, we're against unjust hierarchies, but an unjust hierarchy is the opposite of one that's created naturally. It's one created through fiat and coercion, whereas natural hierarchies are just what happens when you remove coercion, and the market and people just organize themselves based upon, and I cite him as I remember him pre Daily Wire age, era, not current era, but as Jordan Peterson would call it, hierarchies of competence,
Yes.
not hierarchies of power.
And
So, like, we are
I love
yeah,
that he moderated that, or he changed that terminology, because he started off with dominance hierarchies. That's what he called it,
right.
right? And then he switched it to competence, which I think is a better term, more descriptive term.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. So, I think that so something you said, which kind of go back to something you said earlier, which I think I agree, but I kind of disagree, where it's like people spend too much time thinking about how anarchy works or how we would get there. And I think certainly you can spend too much time in that, right? Because the truth is, we don't know, right? There's no way to 100% know how to get to a free society, or to have complete confidence in how every possible conceivable problem with a anarchic society might get solved. And there is wisdom to sort of just starting with yourself. And I think, yeah, certainly a useful component of, or a necessary ingredient to getting to a free society is individuals freeing themselves and building the sort of counter markets and counter institutions that would eventually replace a state. So I think that's all true. I do think there is something to like the and we have great libertarian writers who have done a lot of work on this, you know, economists as well, to try to at least model these sort of like, so there's like the private production of defense by Hoppe. I know Bob Murphy's done work on this, just trying to kind of like problem solve and to at least provide a sort of like rational defense and theory for how like because as you said, we're not against defense or even like police or things like that, like services that society needs. We're just trying to explain how we can kind of have the good parts of what modern society gives us, but like without the coercion, without the inefficiency. So I do feel like this is actually one of my criticisms of the Zulu crowd is that I think sometimes they focus so much on the just like the philosophy and the ethic, and then they're just like, all that matters is just that you believe in the nap, and then that everyone believes in the nap, and the rest takes care of itself. And I'm like, I mean, like, kind of, but that's not necessarily going to be like on its own persuasive to every, like, some people are at least going to like need some kind of at least hypothetical proof of concept, because this is where I think a little bit of humility comes in to at least say like the society we're advocating for doesn't exist today. And I know there are examples where it's kind of existed throughout history, but like none of them are, they all have kind of like at least a little bit of like, actually, I see Emily Mower 9902 just gave us a $5 super chat. Thank you very much, Emily. Ireland had anarchy for 1,000 years, and like you're correct in a sense. And I want to like there's actually, and I always forget to have this up. Ace Archist, great
Mhm.
follow on X, has this post which I bookmarked. Actually, I think I did bookmark it. I could probably find it if I go and look at my bookmarks quick.
Yeah, he's got the
But
list of all of the anarchic societies throughout history. I've seen that post.
yeah, and so and yet even he said in this one that I bookmarked, which I just can't find right now, but that it like there is an asterisk next to it where it's like it's it's very close to what we're advocating for, but it's not like there's always at least some slight deviation here. I actually have it pulled up. I'm going to share my screen, and I've always like wanted to do this because it's a great post. I've never like had that question come up. So, yeah, ancient Ireland for, he says, 2,000 years actually. Medieval Iceland for 400 years. Caspeia for 400 years. The neutral Morsent for 100 years. Friesa for 700 years. Zamia current day population 150 million. There's actually a great book about Zamia, which is really fascinating to read. I forget the author's name. I think it's called like the I forget what but I think it's like the art of not being governed or something like that. If I'm remembering correctly. I'm looking it up right now as I'm referencing it. I've not read the whole book, but I read, yeah, The Art of Not Being Governed by James Scott, which is a whole book about this civilization in Zamia, which is, it's anarchic, not necessarily completely anarchy, but it has elements of that. He brings up, yeah. So there's the not so the Wild West is actually kind of a good example. So this is great, and I think we should talk about this stuff. Um, there is always like, I think people are kind of asking a question of like, but like, is there an example of like a modern society with modern technology with sort of like everything that comes, because like Zamia, for example, is a much more agrarian society. It's
Mhm.
not quite hunter gatherer, but it's closer to that. And that's the same thing with Ireland. Is like people are kind of like, yeah, I guess when people were like less densely populated without modern technology and modern society, maybe there was like an anarchic element to it, but like it's not, cities and uh lots of free trade and interaction of multiple cultures at once. in this anarchic way. So I think that anyway, go. I just rambled for a bit, but go ahead and talk.
It's super interesting to me, and I love this. Right, being an anarchist, like I love all these historic examples, and I think to reference your point about Zulu's crowd, like I think one of the benefits they bring that people don't appreciate is that I think there is a lack of focus on ethics, and so I think having that to the forefront, because I think about people when they say, well, you know, how many anarchic societies have there been? We've always kind of had a government. And I always kind of think like, okay, well, you're kind of being like the person in the 1800s being like, yo, if we freed the slaves, who the hell is going to pick the cotton? I'm like, I don't care who it is. Let's not enslave people. Like maybe we start there. Maybe the ethical argument is really an important place to start. And getting people, like you called out earlier, to understand like this is not consent, right? The social contract isn't real. This is bullshit. This is something that we don't get a choice whether we consent to or not. You get a gun pointed in your face when you're sort of ring fenced by a border, and you're going to do it this way or else, buddy. And I think that's an underappreciated argument. And I think a lot of people, because I talk to these people a lot, and I watch them go through the mental gymnastics when I say to them, look, every law is basically an opinion backed by a gun, and there's a death threat implied, and people don't want to listen to that. Like, no, you're going to be arrested. I'm like, well, yeah, but what if I don't want to be arrested? They will escalate that to murder every single time. I think it's an important topic to raise. So it's really important stuff to talk about. But when I think about it, it's like, Jacob, we can't even cut $1 from the budget. Why are we? I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like it's so dumb. It's like we'd love to have a free society. I would, and I would do anything to get there. But I just don't see any evidence.
Did you steal a penny? Sorry.
No, torture my child forever, man. I'm not stealing that penny.
I had to go there. Well, I don't know how to pronounce this because I saw the comment. It's Atlian 715. So got to find a way to bring the normies, me, into anarchy. Zulu is not it. Yeah, I think that's a somewhat fair criticism, even though I like Zulu. But yeah, I feel like there's something. So, are you familiar with the Isaiah's job strategy and the whole idea of like gathering the remnant and speaking to the remnant, and that like there's that's like Zulu's strategy and some people's strategy. They're like they say the way to make a free society is I'm condensing this in my own words. Like I'm sure he would say it differently, but like the way to get to a free society is that what moves society is a small minority who are like pushing a particular philosophy, and that they're radicals and they sort of drag society into kind of like believing that philosophy or acting it out, even if they're not like 100% convinced on it. And I'm like, I don't know. Like, listen, it comes from, it appeals to me because it's pulling on a biblical story, right? Where Isaiah's job was, he was told by God he was a prophet, and God told him like, you're going to go and preach all over the place about like how judgment is coming because they've turned their back on God and they're corrupt and evil and engaging in all sorts of sinful stuff. And then Isaiah's like, why am I doing this? Like, people are laughing at me and not taking me seriously. And God's like, well, the point is like, yeah, like you might not see a lot of immediate fruit to what you're saying, but there's going to be a small remnant of people who are going to hear the message and aren't going to turn their back on me. And they'll be, sort of preserved through the hard times that are coming. And like, there's something to that. But I also feel like, I don't know, like, I do think we do need to kind of try to appeal to normies, but there's this problem where I feel like some libertarians know they have to appeal to normies, but they appeal to normies by then just going full prag and watering the message down and just being like, you can't be a libertarian and support mass deportations. And like, listen, like I love Dave. Like Dave's a friend. And like I've told him, I'm not saying I've said this to his face. It's like I even get, like I get there's something about like importing 30 million people from another country that's more of a third world country with cultural issues, that like that's not a free market outcome. That's a state action intervention, and that has negative consequences. But I just feel like you got to find ways to deal with that aren't like militarizing the border and creating a police state and suspending due process and all these other problems that come with mass deportation. And I want to make room for people who are concerned about immigration, but I don't want to like tell them like, like I want to gently and in good faith push them to be like, what you're advocating for is not going to actually make you more safe or more free. But we're always kind of stuck between this sort of like scare away the normies or just like water down libertarianism to make it, so palatable to the normies that it's no longer libertarianism.
Yeah, and that's a durable problem, and I don't think, and this is where I think that the libertarian community could do a lot better, or sorry, liberty-leaning. I'm gonna have big attempt as I possibly can have. uh, is that people have different functions, and I think people oftentimes forget, particularly people that are on our, like you and me, like our side, uh, Derek Will's side, like the people that are very, very much towards that anarchic side.
Love
You,
Derek.
I love Derek too. He's my homie. You kind of forget that the journey to liberty is not a straight line, right? Like you kind of have to have your gateway drug. And for us, my generation was Ron Paul. It's like he brought so many people in, and some people just stayed there. They're like this sort of like, venerate the Constitution and we're gonna do small government, whatever. Like, and you get stuck there. And that's fine. Like some people get stuck there, but sometimes that's just a jumping off point. They learn about other stuff and they move over time. And I think people need to understand. I think this is like, I'm not a Christian, but I know you are, and you know that Bible verse that talks about the body of Christ and like all the different parts of it, and there's different functions everyone has, and I think libertarians could learn a lot from that, as opposed to trying to stop the I from being an I. Just like let the I be an I. Like I had this issue with I was trying to resolve actually between Derek and Josie, because they kind of were in a little bit of a beef.
Yeah.
And she gets in a beef with a bunch of people, and I understand why she rubs people the wrong way. But I literally tried to, through an intermediary, being like, hey, can we same team this thing here? Can we just like stop this shit?
Yeah.
Because I think that the normies are going to have people to speak to them, and maybe it's just for now, right, to get them in the door, and then somebody else can have a conversation with them. But the fact that you walk in the door and you look around the sort of liberty world and you're like, what is this shit? It's a bunch of crazy autists screaming at each other and like not setting a good example and being toxic. And I'm like, yo, like we could do a lot better if you just left people alone. Like have a good faith discussion. If you disagree with them, fine. Say it in a way that's not inflammatory. Don't blow them up and try to score points and do ego shit. And like, actually, if we really care about liberty in the real world, and it's not like a game, like you're trying to score points and dunk and all this other stuff, then it's like, then develop some relationships with people. Actually talk to somebody instead of tweeting at them. Like develop some sort of relationship that somebody from the outside would look and say, oh, you 5 people over there, you're actually quite different in the way you view things, but I see you having a respectful dialogue, and I see all your different points, and maybe we'll talk about it, engage, and be drawn in and say like, oh, I actually want to be like these people. These are respectful. These are thoughtful people. They've got good arguments, as opposed to the circus freak show that I kind of see now. So that's my lamentation of what I'm seeing in the community.
No, I agree with that. And it's like I know Josie and I like her, and I obviously have some things I disagree with her on. She's more in that like constitutionalist lane. But like I simultaneously want, listen, like maybe like if I was going to, in the spirit of compromise, like agree with some of the radicals who want to just say like they're not real libertarians and libertarians are just anarchists or something. It's like, okay, like we can quibble about that. Maybe you're right. But like we're on the same team or coalition insofar as like the actual like enemy, like the state as it exists today cares, right? Like it doesn't matter. Like all these debates are gonna really not mean a lot when we're kind of loaded onto the same boxcar, right? And that's kind of my thing. Is like, listen, like we don't even like you and I like you're agnostic. You're not. I know you're kind of like open to religion and spirituality, but like you don't have faith yet. There are some people who are not even open to it, who are kind of more like kind of in that militant atheist camp, but who are libertarians. And there's actually this one guy who's in the who I've interacted with on Discord, and he keeps on trying to like kind of like push me to do a like at least private debate or something with him on like atheism versus
Oh my
Christianity.
gosh.
And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, first of all, I'm not an apologist. That's not my lane. I listen to apologetics and apologetic debates, and like I can kind of hold my own, but like I haven't practiced that. That's not my calling. But beyond that, even if like I wanted to engage in it, it just kind of it feels like, why would I be debating a libertarian atheist right now when it's like we're kind of like in a foxhole getting gunned down by the same enemy, and it's like I'm asking for him to kind of like pass him, a magazine to me to load into my firearm, and he's just like, "Well, hold on. Right now, we need to discuss, whether or not you have good reasons to believe in a creator or not, because I don't think there's any
Ah.
evidence for God." And I'm just like, "Do you not recognize the context of the moment we're in?"
Well, not only that, but it really strikes me as odd that he would pick you to do that too. You're an anarchist, right? So I get if you're an atheist and you're like, well, I don't want a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or whoever is coming from a religious perspective, grabbing the gun of government and forcing that upon me. I understand that approach, right? But like Jacob's like, I don't want a government at all. And why then why? Other than trying to like I said, have an ego
Not only
thing or
that,
try.
but someone who has made a podcast and a like side career for writing articles and creating content to convince other Christians to not want a government. Because
Right,
it's
right.
like I always listen, like I acknowledge there's always going to be agnostics and atheists. So like even though I might privately think that society needs Christianity, or at least benefits more from Christianity in terms of like making it more a culture that's more conducive to liberty. But like that's different than what the Christian nationalists are saying, where they're like, well, you can't even have liberty without like everyone being Christian. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by everyone? Because like you can't enforce belief from a central planner or a state, so there's always going to be atheists. And so like I would prefer my atheists and my agnostics and my Hindus and my Muslims and my Jews to like all prefer libertarianism and anarchism. So like I'm kind of incentivized to like, like when I see people who have different beliefs from me but advocating for freedom, then like we can disagree for fun, but I think you gotta have to have a different sort of I don't know, attitude to like how you approach those conversations.
Yeah, and I think that one in particular is one that I think a lot of the Reddit atheist types, they embark upon flippantly. I think they do it probably because there's some religious trauma that they've suffered from, and so they're trying to like tear down that thing that hurt them. But as an atheist, well, I'm an agnostic and an atheist. I don't know if you want to get into the details of what those terms mean. Sometimes people think they're separate, but they're definitely not, or at least not mutually exclusive. I, I am somebody who, like you said, I'm kind of searching. I wish I had faith, because I think life would be a lot easier if I believed there was like some ultimate justice at the end of all this. I think that makes life easier to get through. And I also see tons of value in Christianity in particular. It built the West. There's a whole ton of value it's provided, and a lot of people don't realize what happens when you tear down somebody's belief in that and replace it with nothing, right? Everybody thinks, oh, rationalism is the way we can, move forward. And it's like that experiment's fucking failed like really badly. Like it really has. And I'm somebody who is a rational person. I love science. I love rationality. I love logic. I love philosophy. It doesn't really have the answer for us right now. And even one of the biggest atheist proponents back in the day, Stefan Molyneux, he kind of
Yeah.
agrees now. Like and I see him now where I saw him like literally mocking and laughing about Jesus dying. And so like way back in the, now
Oh, I know. Yeah.
he has collars on and he's like, hey, I don't even want to interrupt your faith, so I'm not even going to say anything right now. Like he's that sensitive
Well,
about it.
it's funny is when I first became an anarchist, I stumbled upon Molyneux's videos, but then saw he was an atheist. But I only saw his like really anti-Christian videos. So then I like wanted to debate him because he would
Mm.
do that call-in show. But then he was just like, I don't really want to debate that because like I'm not really doing that anymore. And then I watched his newer content. So then I actually had him on my old show, the Daniel 3 podcast, people can go back in the archive and find that. I think it's still probably up on YouTube or my old old podcast feed somewhere. But we had a whole conversation about all of that, and like, that he can, actually make an almost semi decent case for libertarianism from a Christian worldview, because he like, uh, so yeah, that's exactly it, right? And I feel like, the other thing is, I feel like if you're an atheist and you think, well, Christians need to like we have like inverted views. Like, so, like, a militant atheist thinks that like I have this belief in like some kind of like ancient superstition, Stone Age,
Hmm.
uh, you know, tribal thing that's distorting my views, and so that he's going to think that that's going to like be a barrier to me, uh, being able to accept liberty or freedom, and then I'm fighting an uphill battle, and like, so I can like steel man their perspective, but yeah, I think what frustrates me is that there's not a lot of like, there's like people like you and like Molyneux, but there's not a lot of atheists who seem to be able to steel man the other perspective, I guess, which is what you said, which is even what like guys like OG Jordan Peterson were saying, and I feel like this is where I think at least part of what's playing out in the liberty movement is sort of like this exact thing where I don't know the right way to say this, like in the most eloquent, succinct way, but I feel like half the problem with the liberty movement and the infighting and some of the toxicity is to the extent to which the movement has sort of like made libertarianism like a religion of sorts, and some libertarians have made like their entire identity and their entire like project just libertarianism. And I
Hmm.
feel like that just, I think it's not good personally, and I think it's also like a distortion of libertarianism, because it's not supposed to be that. Yeah, like it should be like in our ideal society, what we're actually kind of advocating for is kind of like just the most bare bone minimal rule, which is just like don't aggress against people. And that's it. It doesn't really tell you what to do with your life. It just tells you what not to do. It tells you
Yes.
don't aggress against other people. Other than that, like it doesn't tell you how to find meaning, how to find value, how to find love, how to find how to, I mean, Austrian economics is sometimes associated with libertarianism. I understand why, but it doesn't even tell you how to be prosperous, right? Like you need other things for that. And so I get, like, I think it's good we have a liberty movement, but I think part of the danger there is that like people join it, and like some libertarians are just like militant atheists, or just like the street preachers who are
Hmm.
holding up the like fire and brimstone signs, like, repent or you're going to hell. And it's just like you're all the same. Like you're kind of saying different things, but like you're the same archetype.
They're running the same program. It's a human program.
Right.
It's a tribal program, and tribalism is good, right? Like it helped us evolve. Like that's how we survived, is because we're not individuals. And this is something that I think libertarians maybe get a little bit wrong, because they're so focused on the individual rights, which are cool. Like I'm down with all that stuff, but you sort of negate this sort of communal aspect, and I think that's at our own peril. We should be embracing the communal nature of this and saying, like, look, no, this is not antisocial. Just because we're anarchists, we're not antisocial. It's very pro-social. Voluntarily cooperating with our friends and neighbors, like that's the most pro-social thing there is. And I think we make don't do a great job making the case for it. Of talking about things that are really low hanging fruit in my mind, like looking at the welfare state, the way the government operates it, it's trash. It's awful. It's all just a giveaway to giant corporations. It keeps people in poverty. It keeps people disconnected from their communities and their neighbors. Where back in the day, when there wasn't this giant social safety net, there was these churches and mutual aid societies, and people were there and they were vetting, right? So you have to worry about fraud so much because there was somebody that showed up at your church or your communal organization, and you looked at them across the table, and you could, get an impact of like, hey, is this person really destitute and suffering? Is there something that, totally blindsided them? Like there's a widow, there's an orphan, there's some major, health emergency that they can validate. Like there was some vetting that the community did, and there was just some connections, some sort of connective tissue to the community. And now it's like, oh, screw it, government's got it handled. I'm not going to worry about it. Then you complain that the entire bureaucracy is completely unsustainable and it's full of fraud and it makes people suspicious of their neighbors. It's very antisocial, and we do a terrible, terrible job on messaging there. Terrible job of just taking the super low-hanging fruit. It's just like a slow pitch across the plate, and we're busy arguing about some other bullshit internally.
Yeah, I don't know the way out of that other than I guess just trying to model a different way of doing it, which is really tough because then you have to avoid almost like the trap of infighting against the people who do the infighting, right? Like it's almost right because
Mm-hmm.
it's just like I want to push back into the infighting. It's like, but wait, then I'm fighting with you, so I'm like perpetuating the problem, and so like I don't know, like we just have to find a way to be like decent people. Like I was actually talking like so there's uh, a guy on X, Michael Leibowitz has his own
Mm-hmm.
podcast called The Rational Egoist. Uh, Michael and I have very little in common. Like he's an atheist objectivist. So he's a minarchist, not a he believes in a state, not anarchist. He's an atheist. Uh and we should not really have that much in common, but like we get along really well. We met up in person when we went to a Soho forum to debate, and like when we're in comments and stuff, like and it's just funny because like you know that's not to pick on. Well, actually, I'll pick on both. Sometimes objectivists and caps, they have a certain reputation for the people being kind of unbearable, and so I feel like I don't know if you would agree with this. Maybe there's a better way to put this. But when people ask what is the core principle of libertarianism? And of course people are going to say the non-aggression principle. Also, by the way, quick caveat, I saw Mad Dog in the comments and it maybe you misunderstood, but I'm saying the NAP doesn't tell you how to create wealth. Austrian econ, of course, makes you understand wealth creation,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a connection there because like the they feed into each other. But anyway, that was a minor point. But I think the core principle. So, like, do you understand? You know that the principle in Christianity, how like there's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in libertarianism, we need to kind of recognize the same thing. And this is not a philosophical argument, right? Like I know the theory bros will be like, well, you haven't deduced that from like this perfect syllogism. That I'm like, okay, whatever. That's not my point. I'm just riffing as a person, just like trying to point at something that I think is not necessarily philosophical in nature, but is that I guess more of a spiritual or just kind of like, psychological, archetypical truth, which is that the letter of the law in libertarianism is the nap, but the spirit of the law is like that Misesian idea of peace and social cooperation, right? Like that's what we want. Like I would not actually be a supporter of Austrian economics and anarcho-capitalism if they did not lead to promoting peace and social cooperation. Because those are kind of like as a Christian, my ultimate value is like God and my faith in God. But like like that secondary uh obligation is like, like the 10 commandments is the first four are about loving God, and the last six are about loving your neighbor as yourself. That's why Jesus said the two greatest commandments are those two commandments. And so I care about libertarianism, not because I think the nap is elegant. I think the philosophy is good, but ultimately it's because libertarianism helps me to live out loving my neighbor. And I feel like there's too many libertarians who I think are just, they remind me a little bit of Pharisees in terms of like that kind of spirit, right? Where like they're just like, but like, why are you so mad at us? Like we're perfectly following the law. And I'm like, yeah, but you kind of forgot about the heart of it all. And part of that is kind of like, I don't want to sound super cliche or like, uh I don't know, like it sounds kind of cringe to say, but like I don't know, like just be a decent person, be kind to people, like show grace and love and humility. Like people are going to care more about your ideas and your philosophy if you kind of model this spirit of like why those ideas matter in the first place.
Yeah, it goes back to Ron Paul set a good example. Like we people
Yeah.
just forget that entirely, how important that is. How do you expect to attract people or to make your ideas attractive to people so they'll grow when you're a dumpster fire and people look at you, like I said, walk in the door, they're like, oh, getting the hell out of here. It's a real problem. And I think to go back to your Pharisee comment, I see that there's like these nap extremists, right? Which I, I fully believe the non-aggression principle, totally sound ethical philosophy. I'm not no shade on it, but people forget the why. Like I was talking about at the beginning, where
Right.
we get to the core of like, well, what's it for? It's a diagnostic. That's all it is. Like it has some aggression occurred. Like it doesn't say anything about what to do about it. And also, it's a relationship. People forget this. It has to be equal. You cannot be, the Bible calls it unequally yoked. That's the wrong term, or I'm using it in the wrong place, but it's the same thing where you're sort of linked to somebody who, like, for example, the government, right? Like, it's not like you and I are in some private arrangement and we're worrying about our voluntary contract. Aggression is everywhere. And so ethics kind of goes out the window a little bit. When somebody points a gun at you or straps a bomb to your, like a vest to you and says, go rob a bank, when you rob the bank under coercion, that's not the person that's responsible is a person that forced you to do that or committed that action against you. And so people forget that, and they like to look at this NAP through this very myopic lens, like this one particular thing, like you talked about national borders, for example. That's a big hot button issue, and you forget all the other structure that's built up around it, all of the other ways that aggression is baked into the system every single way you turn.
Yeah.
So it's people miss the forest for the trees, is what I'm saying. Is they try to do these exercises about, what's the most pure way to look at the NAP in this particular. It's like, dude, our society top to bottom is baked on violence and coercion. It's just in the system and it's everywhere we turn. So you have to take that larger context when we're looking at society as a whole, and then sort of maybe broaden out a little bit, and then maybe just point out some things instead of fighting about what's the most pure interpretation of this or whatever. But like Dave's saying with borders, maybe you say, like, somebody who's like, hey, we really want to have deportations and strong militarized policing. It's like, well, hey, do you realize that, like Ron Paul says, those exact same people in borders and fences are there to keep you in case you want to leave? Hey, how about Palantir? They're using ICE is using this facial recognition and all these databases that are connected to sort of, that's how, I don't know if you know they're doing it. They have these cameras on these cars, and they're seeing people's faces and biometrics, and they know who these people are. And like, oh, you're not a citizen. That's going to be used against you. Maybe make that argument, right? Like, I think that would be a more fruitful way to approach it than just being like doing these games, like the NAP gotcha games. It's just not it's not helpful.
Yeah, I just feel like there's more. I don't know, there's just more to life. I'm a libertarian. I'm an anarchist. I believe in the nap, but I just know that that is just one aspect of human experience and society, and we need. And obviously, I'm a Christian, so I'm gonna lean in that direction. But even if you're not a Christian, I think you would agree that there has to be something. I guess there's different things that could serve that purpose, although I think they're always going to fall short, which is why I think Christianity is superior. But even I don't know, you need something to sort of, I think, orient people to realize that there's something bigger than them. I guess I get and I don't want to say this in a collectivist way, but there's an idea of we're against the nation state as anarchists. Uh, and because of that, and because of American propaganda, I kind of have an allergy to some Americanisms, revering the flag and the Pledge of Allegiance, and even kind of
Yep.
a version of American exceptionalism that I think is distorted by the state and public institutions and education. But then there's kind of there's part of maybe the original vision of America, just reading the Declaration of Independence. And I don't know, I think I there's something about you need something to orient people and unify people to, I think, make society work. Like a again, I think Christianity works better for this. Like, cause like if everyone thinks, well, these are my fellow Americans, then that kind of like bypasses that sort of maybe tendency towards like hyper tribalism, which I think is kind of the worry some people have about anarchy, is that it'll kind of like degrade into this sort of like, tribal warfare and whatnot. And I'm like, I don't think that's inevitable. But I do think you need something beyond just the legal code to prevent that. You need something that, and this, I think Christianity is is the best path forward for this, because it is in some way like, this is, I guess, where I have more kind of left leaning tendencies. I don't necessarily want to describe it that way, but they're associated that way. Where like, uh, I don't want to say I'm an egalitarian in the traditional sense of the word, but where the modern left and modern egalitarians kind of draw from is, I think, kind of the original Christian ethos, that like the original Christians study early church history, and what made the Romans hate them wasn't that they believed in one God, because the Jews already believed in one God and they tolerated the Jews. Because why? The Jews kept to their own. They weren't proselytizing. They weren't crossing ethnic barriers. Christians were like, there's one God, there's one king, and it's not Caesar. And also, all these ethnic divides and these class divides don't really matter, because we're all one in Christ. And that's what made the early church like this growing threat to Roman superiority and supremacy and power, without being even violent. Like, it wasn't like an armed resistance. It was just a countercultural resistance. And so that kind of like that's why I think what I think some libertarians struggle to understand why I think Christianity is needed. It's not because I'm not a Christian nationalist, and I'm not like trying to uh I think there's some things about like what Hoppe talks about with time preference and certain behaviors that are like kind of interesting to talk about. But I think it's more that just like we need a common identity, and maybe you can try to do a secular humanist thing to do that. But I don't
It
know. I
doesn't
think
work.
without,
It
I
doesn't
don't, yeah,
work, man. And here, I'm going to tell you why. And as you were speaking, it really became apparent to me is that one of the benefits Christianity has is the narrative. And I think, you talked to Jordan Peterson earlier, like he's provided so much value here with maps and meaning. And there's sort of this unifying narrative structure to the belief system that like you said, this is one of the beauties of Christianity, is that it's not tied to an ethnic group or a location, or it's universal. Like anybody can become a Christian anywhere in the world, and anywhere you go in the world, cross language borders, country borders, you all have that unifying narrative that you rally around, you identify with. And this is maybe where secular humanism and maybe libertarianism, NAP doesn't have the same power narratively as having these stories. And regardless of whether they're true or not, they're kind of cool stories. Dude gets eaten by a whale for a while, gets barfed up on the shore, converts some people in Nineveh, and then you got Jesus, and you have like raising from the dead, and dude's partying, making wine out of water, like all this stuff that's like really powerful, and it gets embedded in the culture, and it's something to have sort of commonality, and that tribalism we talked about, this intentional tribalism of having that shared unity, and libertarians don't have that. Even the state has that. We have Paul Revere and the Revolutionary War, and we have the Civil War, we have World War II, like this narrative that goes across time that we all sort of got embedded into our brains by chanting to the flag and doing all these sort of
yep.
exercises. At least the US government has got a narrative behind it. What do we have in the liberty community? It's like we don't have much, honestly. But in theory, we got, it's an intellectual undertaking. It's not something that people, especially
Yeah,
people who aren't into that sort of thing, ethical philosophy, or the details of Austrian economics. Like, if you're not a super nerd, like what's there for the average person other than
exactly. Well,
you
and I
know
think, not to cut you off, but like this just occurred to me that like something Dave said in the debate, which I disagreed with how he said it, but I think what he actually meant is more what you're saying, because he said people don't care about consistency, and I'm like, well, I think people can be persuaded by how consistent you are, because you'll connect dots for them. But I think what he's actually getting at is more of this, like, people are not persuaded by philosophy being like, like syllogisms, right? That's not going to convince the average person.
Nobody
But
does that shit.
when you sell philosophy as being part of a story, and what makes Dave Smith great is that he embeds liberty and the principles of liberty in deconstructing the state narrative and propaganda and
Hmm.
reconstructing it into a narrative that has liberty and truth baked into it, right? Like he's kind of a storyteller, if you will, right? And that's why people are drawn to are persuaded by him. Like people who persuade large groups of people are largely not doing it through syllogisms, but through marrying yeah, like marrying truth and myth. Even that kind of sounds kind of paradoxical, but I don't think it is. Brent, we're running low on time. So I want to give you the last word here to give any closing thought and plug your show. I do want to remind people that this is our end of the year fundraiser here at LCI. So every dollar you donate from now to the end of the month is doubled, and you can go to libertarianchristians.com/donate in order to do that. Really appreciate it. But Brent, any closing thoughts you have on anything we've talked about that you really, something I've been trying to remember to ask people, and I'll kind of ask you this. You can work in anything you want, but like, what is one question you think that people are not asking enough, whether that's libertarians or just in general? Like, what's one question that people need to ask and think about more?
Ooh, that's a good one. I would say it would be inwardly focused. What can I do to better myself? I think this goes back to my overarching theme for aiming up podcasts, and just my general view on the world is that people are so hyper focused on the other. It's easy, it's low cost to say Donald Trump's ruining my life, or the Democrats are ruining my life, or these immigrants, or whoever. Like, it's so easy to blame somebody else for everything that's wrong with your life. And I think people don't spend nearly enough time on how do I fix me? Because we're all messed up, right? Being a human is hard, right? Life is very difficult. Life's very tragic for all of us in various ways. And we all struggle with things. And the more time you spend inwardly focused, trying to improve yourself, whether it be your physical health, your mental health, learning important things, learning philosophy, learning ethics, learning economics, learning how to build something on your own, right? Like, just whatever that is to improve yourself. Like, if you spent half the time you spent arguing online and pointing out like some politician who's causing all your problems, you'd realize you have more control over your own life than you think. There's that old saying, it's like, hey, you can just do things, and most people, if they just realize, like, stop wasting your life doing this stuff over here, just go do something, right? Make the world a better place, make yourself a better place. Start with concentric circles with you in the center, then your family and sort of a community, and go
Yep.
outward, as opposed to jumping all the way to the macro society level. I think we'd all be better off if we just did that one practice.
I think that's so true. And like I had James Lindsay on the show like a couple months ago, and we talked about this too. Because on one hand, I sometimes give crap to people like James Lindsay and other conservatives who can sometimes like say this message to the expense of sort of like ignoring systemic problems. And I think we always need to like recognize, because of the Federal Reserve and inflation and war and state programs, there are legitimate grievances. But if you let those grievances consume you and become the excuse for not at least trying to make your life better, uh, at the very like that's not a path forward for you, and that's not a path forward for society. So we do need to point out problems when they exist, but that can't like that's step one. And then step two is like, you know what, there's all these societal problems, but like, you know, we can talk about them, we can educate people on them, but also like, what are we gonna do about them? Well, in order to be able to do something about them, you gotta, take care of yourself first. Get yourself right, get your family right, then look to your community first and go from there, right? And the more people we have doing that, that whatever path forward there might be, which we can't centrally plan, that is the step one. is people starting with themselves and their family and those concentric circles like you talked about. So I think that's 100% correct. Well, and I'll just read this last comment here from Atlian said, came in a skeptic. Gotta admit, I'm more open to anarchism now. And hey, that's all we're trying to do is just like, you know, talking about these ideas and get people to think about them more. And like, I don't want to toot our horns too much, but like that's what I think the path forward is. It's just like be authentic people and talk about the ideas and like, you know, like I don't need to we don't have to get people to convert overnight or like
Oh,
swear
I
allegiance
hate
to
that
the
term,
nap.
by the
Like
way.
I hate that
Oh,
term. Yeah, it's just like it's a direction. It's an orientation. It's not about it's not like a you got to sign your pledge and like like pledge allegiance to the nap or something like that. So Brent, where can people find you and your show if they want to check you out?
yeah, just at Aiming Up Podcast on YouTube. It's where the most of the episodes are. I'm also on Spotify, although I'm woefully behind getting them published over there. And also, if you want to pick up some great merch, anarchosyndicate.com, or on Twitter, the clothing company is anarchoscc. So that's where to find me.
Awesome. Thanks, Brett, for coming on. We'll definitely have to do this again sometime. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening. Please make sure that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Give this video a thumbs up so that more people see it in the algorithms. And yeah, thank you all for who tuned in, listened, and commented and super chatted. I appreciate you. Appreciate your support. And I'll be back here again Thursday, and I'm blanking on my guest's name for who's coming on Thursday, but I will be back here Thursday at 8 o'clock. So I'm really sad I can't remember my guest's name. I'm gonna look it up quick because I'm always bad at remembering my schedule, but I know they're in my inbox. Uh, filibustering while I look. Where are they? I can't find them now. I have a guest coming on Thursday. Can't remember who it is, but tune in Thursday and you'll find out who it is. I'll post about it probably tomorrow just to uh, remind people. But yeah, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll talk again later. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.